Okay.
Feeling?
I honestly, I'm by the end of the afternoon, I started to feel myself again. So I'm feeling much better, much
All right,
better.
well,
So
just
thank
take it
you.
easy and, don't
Yeah,
overexert yourself, okay?
I'm trying. I
Okay.
appreciate that though. I appreciate that very much. Um, but as I was just saying to Cantor Kevin, I did not bring an umbrella, which was probably not the
Is it,
smartest.
is it raining now? I don't,
It seems like there's a little bit of a break at the moment,
yeah.
which is good. From what I gather, it will pick up steam from this point on. That was last I checked, but it's hard to know with this weather stuff. It's not
Are you
so.
gonna
It'll
have
be on and
services
off.
tomorrow morning?
The
And
plan is to have services. I mean, no matter what, there'll be services, and unless something changes, it'll be in person for anybody who wants to
okay,
come in person.
I think I might come.
Yeah, yeah. I would just, use your best judgment. My main concern about tonight was wind and in the
Yeah,
dark. Those
okay.
two things. During the daytime, I think so long as there isn't flooding, should be fine.
And it's
Uh,
warm out. It's crazy. It's,
yeah, no, that was the weirdest thing. Like this morning
it's
is
like
like,
66 degrees. It's like, give
yeah.
me a break. Okay.
Who would guess these things? Weather's
Mm-mm.
crazy, but main
Yeah.
thing is everybody be safe.
Yes,
The
exactly.
that's the
Okay.
I
key
was
thing.
thinking, I wondered why I closed the pool so early.
I know that's a very good
Hey,
point.
Bonnie.
I feel like everybody
Hi.
the same thing. I know, this year I closed it earlier than normal because I figured,
Yeah, we did
no
too.
way. Last year by that point it was some outrageously cold period of time. Hey Beth, how
Hey,
are you?
Beth.
Good Shabbos.
Chavez.
I always say this is that weird nostalgia that we have for Zoom services, right? It's like after all that time of being used to it, it
Yeah.
still feels sort of strange.
Yeah. It's like old hat now.
Right. I guess that's true. All right.
Dan, the live stream on the web is not functioning.
Not working? All right, let me see
No.
here what that's about.
Yeah, when I went to check in, it said it's not scheduled till tomorrow morning service.
Oh,
That's not good. Why would that be the case?
oh, Andrea.
Hold on. No, it's working now. It might have been if you went on earlier, it might not have been. So
Okay.
now it should be okay.
Okay.
If by the way anybody else was having trouble, the streaming seems to be working on the website now. If you'd feel more comfortable going back to the stream, that is totally fine. But in any case, I think we'll get started. We have Cantor Kevin with us virtually. Let me just click on a couple of things here. I'm gonna just mute everybody for now, so apologize for that. And we'll take off the piece here, get rid of this. Let's put Cantor Kevin up with me. Okay, hopefully everybody can see me, Cantor Kevin. So far, so good. Everybody can hear us okay? So far, so good. So I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Let me just see, I saw one text. Okay, Kathy Weiss says yes, working on the web. Bonnie says yes. Good things. Technology, what can I tell you? I was just saying also to Kevin that anytime we have to make a decision about, I wouldn't call it canceling because obviously we're together, but adjusting things, whether you've done the right thing or the wrong thing. And what I noticed as I went downstairs is that the AA meeting is not happening. So they almost never cancel. So if they've canceled, then I think we've done the right thing. I think we're all in the right place. But I miss all of you who I would have seen in person. But I'm actually, as I said, somewhat nostalgic for these times, which we actually get a little bit more of that kind of interactive feeling, kind of what we had when we were back at the temple, actually, where it was in a sort of smaller, tighter environment in its own weird kind of way. So in any case, the most important thing, as every decision, at least the decisions that I'm involved in at the temple are concerned, life and the preservation of life is always going to be the top priority. So we make sure everybody stays home safe tonight, and I hope will remain safe, and just be smart about where you are. And hopefully here at the church, I will not lose power. So that's my only other thing is hopefully between Cantor Kevin and myself, we'll pray for a certain amount of help here. But Marcia tells me it doesn't mean. But Marcia, usually by this point they're in there, but Marcia knows, so we'll give credit where it is. So we're going to get our service started, and we're on page 120. And if you see behind me, hopefully you can see. Let me adjust my camera. If my candle's ready to go. And again, page 120 in our prayer books. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. And now we'll turn it over to Cantor Kevin, who will get our service started on page 130 at the very top of the page. Again, page 130 at the very top of the page.
We will now continue on page 131 with Shiru Adonai. Shiru Adonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Adonai, Barechu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato, Shiru Adonai, Barechu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato, Shiru Adonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Adonai, Barechu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato, Shiru Adonai, Barechu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato. Words are rule on the next page, 132. Words are rule na tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. Words are rule na tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. Words are rule na tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. U'lishrei lev simcha. Words are rule na tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. U'lishrei lev simcha. Words are ruach, not tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. Words are ruach, not tzadik, u'lishrei lev simcha. Zarul Adonai, page 134. Zarul Adonai bechinor bechol zimra, בחצוצרות בקול שופר, הריעו לפני המלך אדוני, ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושבי בה. נהרות ימחאו כף יחד, הרים ירננו, לפני אדוני קיווה, לשפוט הארץ, לשפוט תבל בצדק, ועמים במישרים. ירם הים ומלואו, תבל ויושבי בה. נהרות ימחאו כף יחד, הרים ירננו. 135 at the bottom, the last paragraph, Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu behar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu behar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu behar kodsho. We'll now turn to page 138 as we prepare for the Chadodi, and we'll be singing the first, second, fifth, and ninth verse. And if you feel free to stand on this ninth verse if you wish, but because we're on Zoom, I'd rather that you see me and having to do all the adjustments. So I'm going to stay seated, but feel free to stand if you'd like. I'm going to put my cape on as well. And away we go. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, ishmi'anu el hamiuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad, l'shem ultiferet v'litzila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha. סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Verse 5. התעוררי, כי באורי, קומי אורי, אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרא בלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרא בלה. Feel free to rise if you feel. בואי ושלום מטהרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרא בלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרא בלה. Free to be seated if you were standing. We now turn to the bottom as well, the bottom paragraph of page 140 in the Hebrew for Tzaddik Katama. Tzaddik Katama yifrach, ke'erez balevanon yizke sheturim beveit Adonai bechatrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yedun betzeva teshenim veganim iyu lehagir ki yashar Adonai Suri velo avlatabo.
We'll turn now to the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144. Yitkadal veyitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrach yirutei ve'amlich machutei, Bechayechon uvyomechon uchayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala, uvizman kariv veimeru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach, le'alam li'almei almaya yitbarach, ve'yishtabach, ve'yitbar v'yitromam ve'yitnaseh, V'hitadar, v'hitale, v'hitalal, shemei dekudsha brichu, leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, tamiran be'alma, ve'imeru, amen. We turn now to page 146 for the Baruch. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. We'll turn now to page 148. We'll read together in English at the bottom of the page. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uben laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, echai v'kayam tamid yimlach aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amari v'arabim. We're now on page 150, and we'll read together first in English at the bottom of the page. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Ki ehem chayinu ve'orech yameinu, uvahem negei yomam v'layla, v'avatcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. We'll turn it back to Cantor Kevin as we turn to page 152.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. We'll read together on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As Cantor Kevin leads us in Michamocha on the top of page 158.
באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נעתר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושי פלא, נורא תהילות עושי פלא. מלכותך רעו לבניך, בוקע ים לפני משה, צליאנו ואמרו, צליאנו ואמרו, אדוני עמו לעולם ועד, אדוני עמו לעולם ועד. then we can continue on page 160 with a Hashkivenu, which I think is especially appropriate given the weather right now. So, hope everyone is home safe and staying out of the weather as much as possible. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. Ushmor tzeitzenu uvoenu l'chaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu Malkeinu l'chaim. On page 162, we continue with Vishamru. Vishamru bnei Israel et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם בין מי ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
We'll begin the Amidah as we always do together on page 164, but from that point on, we'll give a few moments, really about 4 or 5 minutes, so that there's enough ample time for everyone to either pray the Amidah as it appears on the page, or to use this as an opportunity for some silent prayer and reflection in a way that is most meaningful to you. So as always, we'll start on page 164 and do that together, continue silently from there, and as always, please do really go at your own pace. And again, we'll start together, page 164, and continue from there. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi yagi tehilatecha Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Shalom Rav al Israel Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav al Israel Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon לכל השלום, כי אתה הוא מלך אדון, לכל השלום. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
We'll turn now to page 371 for our Misha Berach. And Cantor Kevin, I'm not sure if you have that handy, but in a second we could maybe come back to you. That would be great. This evening, we're thinking first in our community of Bentzi Tepper, Allison Luckman, Malka Bat Chaya Sura, Michael Klinghofer, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Rivka Bat Rachel, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sylvia Deborah Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Rose Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Talia Pomeroy, Michoel Ben Hanania, Devorah Batsima, Rebecca Lila Snyder, Jeffrey Miller, Shelley Lyman, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Oren, Stanley Rappaport, Karen Layton, Harold Goldband, and also I just had one, Celia Paul and Steve Rosen as well. And I want to invite those who are with us on our chat in our Zoom. You're welcome to add additional names in the chat as well. Those who are watching at home, you're certainly welcome to add names as well. Also, Evie Romero as well. And really to invite those watching at home, if we didn't mention names of loved ones, to take this opportunity to really hold them in your hearts as we join together on page 371 in the middle of the page, and we'll turn back to Cantor Kevin to lead us in the Misha Berach.
May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mikor haberacha lavoteinu, bless those in need of healing with refuah shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say,
Thank you, Cantor Kevin, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's great to see you, and I want to talk to you tonight about something that I'm very excited about, and especially excited about because it really is a lay-driven idea. It came from amongst our community. It was not something that I brought to the fore, but something that emerged out of a wonderful group of dedicated people who are part of our congregation with an idea to spread it and to open it up to everyone who was interested. I have to admit, I was homesick all week pretty much this week, so I hope that the announcement already came out, and if not, I'm ahead of it. But there is a trip that is planned for this coming spring, sort of later winter, early spring, which is something that we've never done as a congregation. And I'm seeing some heads nodding, which means I hope that it reached several people. And it is a journey to the South that is intended to focus on the civil rights battle in its earliest days, and what I think is really a reflection of the ongoing struggle. While we tend to think about the civil rights movement as a piece of history in which there was a beginning, a middle, and an end, and now we're post that period of time and everything is happy and everything is fine, the reality is that the civil rights journey, so to speak, has never ended. As we just concluded a series of elections all across the country, in which, thank God, we've seen, the ability for most people to freely exercise that right, reminding ourselves that the civil rights work is in most of our lifetimes, and if not our lifetimes, the lifetimes of our parents, in my case. So this is not an ancient piece of history, but it's one in which actually there is a constant need to reaffirm and to reconnect ourselves to both the past historical experience, but much more importantly, to the present realities of what we need to do as a society, as a people, and ultimately as a religion, in the face of attempts in various forms over various years in various places to, if not restrict, and if not make entirely impossible, to certainly make more challenging than it ought to be the right that is supposedly given to all of us as part of our established rights in this country, the ability to vote. Something that, again, for most of us, many of us, I'll just speak for those of us that grew up in a different environment, certainly myself growing up in New York, to which it was never a question of my ability to act. So what, again, am I talking about here? Our Social Justice Committee came up with the idea of journeying to the South using a program known as Etgar 36. Etgar, if I remember correctly, in Hebrew is really a word actually for a challenge of some sort, something that one is meant to be challenged by. And the number 36 is from the original idea of this nonprofit and its organization that was started by a wonderful man named Billy Planer. And Billy had this idea a number of years ago that while a lot of programs, especially for young people, focus on traveling internationally, okay, and again, speaking of a child of somebody who does this quite regularly, it's understandable why. We go to Israel, we go to Morocco, we go to Budapest, we go to India, we go to wherever we may go, and we go because there is over there some image of something for us, to learn about. The reality is that for most of us who grow up in a country as large as ours, have almost no reason ever to go to Alabama, to Mississippi. Some cases we go to Georgia, if nothing else, to fly through Hartsfield International Airport. But primarily, we don't have a whole lot of occasion to know our own country, including our own countrymen and women, including their own complex and unique histories. And so he created this program. The reason it's called Etgar 36 was that it was a 36-day program for young people during the summer, in which they would travel all over the country, in which they would learn about individual states, individual cities, their histories, their cultures, their food, their problems, their politics, their opportunities, and to grow in a next generation an awareness of something beyond just the limited bubble in which most young people are born, grow up in, and ultimately live their lives in. And as he continued to do that work, he realized that the need for this kind of journey was much greater than I think he anticipated. And over time, it morphed and evolved, and at this point includes also during the academic year when the students are generally in school, trips that are run just like the one that is going to be run for us, in which synagogues, Jewish institutions are taken on this really unique, very short but very packed journey, which generally focuses, again, flying into Atlanta and then either journeying to either primarily Mississippi or to Alabama and to some of the most important places in the story, in the struggle of the civil rights movement. And one layer to add to this, which I think is something that a lot of us are hyper aware of these days, especially, in the same way that the generations that experienced the Holocaust firsthand have grown and ultimately are passing away, the number of people who are left who have firsthand accounts of the experience are passing away as well. And one of the things that we have seen and we have learned is how quickly and how easily narratives, stories, facts can be changed, manipulated, and outright erased when those voices suddenly cease to be. And to some degree, if we don't hear from the original people themselves, the people who still are living in the Selmas of the world, the Montgomerys of the world, the Atlantas, if we don't hear it from them, these voices, these stories, these narratives, these people, ultimately speaking, are relegated to a piece of the past, which again, in the environments where they are found, there are many people who actively are trying to erase their stories and their identities and the realities of what it is that they faced in the times in which they faced it. So Billy Planer basically decided that this was going to be his life's work. And he was going to focus on sort of in multiple elements, the idea of getting us more familiar with our own country, our own history, our own challenges, and with a broader view that by knowing more about ourselves and about the places in which we are needed, in which we are needed to be engaged, the more that it won't just be about, for example, just the civil rights movement and about its history, but actually of a broader awareness of who we are as people and who we are as the Jewish people in trying to address the world's challenges, ills, and injustices. So I want to just take a sort of step back for a second before I talk more specifically about some of the elements of the trip to highlight them, and ultimately all of this to push as many of us are able to join in this trip as possible, both for the purposes of the individual learning that will take place, but also just importantly of coming back here to Sag Harbor and sharing some of these stories and these experiences and some of the inspiration to, again, engage in the necessary work that we all have to understand and acknowledge that is still needed in this country to inform what really propelled the civil rights movement in the first place, which is to ensure that everyone who is given the right to vote has the access to vote with no impediments, with no challenges, with no preference to one race, one religion, one creed, one way of thinking over another. And if anybody thinks, again, we've just watched another election take place, if anybody thinks that this is not a front and center issue for us, it is fundamentally front and center issue for all of us. So I want to just talk about what is this trip about and what is involved in it and what will it involve in terms of your involvement. So it's actually a very condensed trip. The idea is that everyone will fly in their own way and arrive in Atlanta on Thursday. This is March 30th. And then the program itself really starts Friday morning. In our case, we will focus more on the trip to Alabama. So we will stop in Montgomery. We'll visit the Rosa Parks Museum, which, I should have mentioned at the outset, when I was an intern, before I became your rabbi, my last year in school, I was an intern at Woodlands Community Temple, as many of you know, which is in Ardsley and Westchester. And my rabbi, my mentor, Rabbi Billy Dreskin, his community had been doing this trip already for years before I got there. And primarily it was a trip for the younger people in their community. It was for the slightly older kids in their Hebrew school who would all get this experience before going off to college. But as I said, it's been broadened out and expanded so that people of any age and any background can be able to join. And when I was on this trip, again, as an intern, I had the benefit of really being able to watch and to observe and to see not just, again, about the trip, but how that trip translated back to the community at Woodlands. How these young people, how the participants of the trip were able to then get up in front of the congregation and speak firsthand about what they saw, who they met, what they engaged with. And as I said, while all of us, I hope, are familiar with Rosa Parks, I would probably expect if we were to do a share of hands of how many of us have been to Montgomery, Alabama to see that museum, my guess is that I am the one, if not very few of us on the list. And again, one can learn about Rosa Parks from a million different books, a million different things, a wonderful museum in Washington, D.C., all manner of things. But to be in Montgomery and to see Montgomery and to understand what it really took to first stand up in the way, literally sit down in the way that she did, and then for that to perpetuate what ultimately becomes a significant series of events in the civil rights narrative, it really, it hits you in a different kind of way, a very different kind of way to see it with your own eyes. Ultimately speaking, there is then a transfer and an opportunity to observe the lynching memorial, which is in Montgomery, which is one of many throughout the South, but one that is of particular power. And then to visit what is actually, what I'm told is a newer museum known as the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum, which explores the evolution of racial oppression, in particular in the South, but really across the country, from slavery and ultimately to today's issues of mass incarceration and many other issues as well. And we'll have an opportunity also for Shabbat services in the midst of all of this as well. And then on Saturday, on Shabbat, we'll travel to Selma, in which we will have an opportunity to hear from and to speak with, again, activists who were involved themselves as young people, really as almost children at this point, in the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, in the march from Selma, and all of the things that we see, and again, tend to associate from pictures and from history books, to really be able to speak again. And I'm hoping that the woman who I met with last time is there, really, again, to hear firsthand accounts of both the brutality and also the remarkable beauty of the experience in the face of all of this anger and hatred and dogs and fire hoses being turned on young children and the elderly. to see also a sea of people non-violently protesting an injustice and ultimately succeeding in that is a remarkably powerful experience. Ultimately speaking, we'll get a chance to go back to Atlanta on Sunday, and this was really quite a remarkable thing as well, which is to journey to Dr. King's church, to the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, and to observe and to be part of a Sunday service there, which for any of you who've never been to a Baptist service, let alone one, as you can imagine, with the kind of established credibility of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, it is quite an experience, quite different than ours in a lot of ways. But it connects us, again, not just to the figure of King in the abstract and the figure of King as a civil rights leader, but to remind ourselves that first and foremost, King was a reverend, that he spent, a considerable amount of his time deeply enmeshed in the texts actually that we share in common, in particular the books of the prophets, of which he and Rabbi Heschel became very close confidants and friends over the years in many ways because of their connection to this one sacred collection of books of the words of the prophets and how they apply in modern terms. And in this experience, if, again, I'm just going to share screen for a moment so that it will set a personal context for you. And I know some of you have seen this before, but there are many treasured objects in my apartment, my parents' apartment in the city, the apartment I grew up in. None is more important really than this picture that hangs there. And while one of the characters is certainly recognizable, we see Dr. King here. This gentleman over here is my father. Him at a much younger age, beardless, of which I've basically never seen in my entire life. And this is held in great reverence to him because of a very important moment in his life. He, along with his friend, who's now Rabbi Moshe Shore, then was Mickey Shore, had gone down along with many Jewish young people in particular, young people I will emphasize, to go to the South to register voters. And when he met, along with many other activists, when he met Dr. King, and that is behind the original church, now it's this big, grand, beautiful building. Originally, it was something quite small and quite humble. That I think my father, along with Mickey and others, saw again the impact of firsthand experience. And I think that really is a big part of why Billy Planer started this program, why he believes in it so much, and why I myself, having had the experience, can tell you that it is a remarkably powerful and effective trip, but not perhaps for the reasons we might think. And I think to give Billy Planer some credit, he really gave a tremendous amount of thought about what is this trip about and what purpose does it serve. And he noted in an article that he wrote, this was already about a decade ago, but he wrote an article in which he acknowledged something interesting in his experience of running trips. And he had led trips, for example, down to New Orleans to rebuild after Katrina, and then after a later hurricane, I believe it was Hurricane Isaac, in which he noted that when Jewish groups wanted to go down, they always sort of felt that the only way that they could experience anything about social action was to act, right? In other words, go down, rebuild things, plant trees, paint houses, those kinds of things, which are in themselves beautiful, and he acknowledges as such. But he noticed that there was something of a gap, because what he found was that everybody had sort of skipped a step, that they'd gone, right into fix-it mode. But really, that kind of work a lot of times is a veneer. It's fixing an immediate issue, but it does nothing for the underlying problems. One of the reasons why New Orleans suffered as much as it did in Katrina, and why, in particular, the Black community, the indigenous communities of that area were hit the hardest, was because of institutional, really racism that pervades every aspect of their lives, to the point in which a person's ability to live, to work, to eat, to sustain themselves, and ultimately to prepare and handle natural disasters that occur is because of systemic problems. And so what Billy sort of felt was that one of his obligations as an educator, and in particular an educator in a region of the country that many of us have very little reason to actually connect with in a one-to-one kind of way, was to make sure that groups weren't just coming down to sort of check a box and to feel good about themselves and pat themselves on the back and then go home, but to realize that actually the work never stops. And that what we actually have to do, in addition to our acting with our hands and trying to fix things, is also to getting to understand what are the roots of the problems, especially in this region of the country, and how are we a part of that narrative, both historically and ongoing. And that if we think, for example, us as learned Northerners will come down and fix all of the Southern problems, that kind of hubris, that kind of arrogance is precisely what creates and broadens the schism that exists between many of us in this country. It doesn't really work that way. That a lot of the first step in trying to actually fix real problems in the real world is first listening is first understanding, is first thinking. The things we jump ahead of because we have the best desire to listen to our Jewish teachings and change the world and affect the world and all those great things we talk about all the time. But I think he's correct that I think a lot of times we put the cart before the horse. And while 3 days of learning in the South is not going to fix the problems in that part of the country or in any part of the country, it's not going to heal the divide in and of itself. The more opportunities that we have to engage, not just again with those who worked in the civil rights movement, but those who live in its reality 60 years later, and to see again the places in which success has been made and the places in which it has not gone far enough. And if we rely on secondhand accounts, third-hand accounts, or even worse, the internet as our sources of information on complex matters, then in many ways, actually, our intention to help can have the opposite effect. That in fact, we can perpetuate all manner of challenge, all manner of misinformation, all manner of things that we have no intention of doing, but we fall into that trap. So I think that I personally very much, and before I even knew that our Social Justice Committee had this idea, I had been thinking about for years that this could be a wonderful program for us because it really affected me personally on the trip that I took. And I think just as importantly, in the young people that were on that particular trip, I saw a switch get flipped for many of them. Because again, most of them lived in affluent parts of Westchester, New York. None of them had ever had any reason whatsoever to travel to the Selmas, to the Montgomerys, to the other parts in between, and even just to see with their eyes, what does it look like? What does Mississippi look like? What is its tone and its tenor? And I think a lot of times our assumption up here is that we know everything about what's going on down there, good, bad, and in between. And I think that if there's one thing that I've learned over my lifetime is if you have an opportunity to travel, and if you have an opportunity, most importantly, to really listen, not tell, but really listen to people in the places in which they live, you will be surprised with how much you learn and how much you are affected and how much you are changed. And this is a trip that I truly, truly believe has that capacity and that potential, not just for the people who go on that trip, but as I said, to come back here to Sag Harbor and to inform the work that we are doing here as we do it there, and the work that we do all over the world, and how we connect it to our Jewish values and to what really the values of Temple Adas Israel are all about. So I want to close with really the tachlis of this, the simple things. A reminder again that the trip runs from really Thursday, March 30th is the arrival day. Everyone can make their own arrangements to get to Atlanta, and from Atlanta will be collected from the airport. And then the main part of the program is Friday, March 31st, Saturday, April 1st, and a portion of Sunday, April 2nd, returning back home then. So if you're out here or if you're in the city, whatever it might be, there are means to go. The information that was sent out to the community lists the pricing and has a robust FAQ with questions to be answered and all those kinds of things. But I also, and I know that our leaders of our SJC committee, certainly Alyssa and Andy, but also Vivian and Heidi, who I think have been really taking the lead on the administrative parts of this, in addition to Eileen. Anybody who has any questions, if you're unsure, if there are things you're unsure about in general, you want to talk to me about it or any of them, we are absolutely here to answer those questions. We have until December 15th to put the deposit down and to establish your spot on the trip. And we really hope very much that we will get a robust turnout for this. I know several have already signed up and are already interested in going. But really, if you can, this is really, really a great, great chance to learn, to be with some great people, to learn with Billy, and ultimately, as I said, for us all to grow in various ways. So with that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. If you did not have any idea what I'm talking about and did not see the email earlier in the week, anybody who sticks on for the oneg afterwards, I'll be happy to pass around that information. And I appreciate very much the hard work of our Social Justice Committee in all things, not just again in the action part of it, but also in raising our awareness and getting us again to think and be engaged on every plane, not just with our hands, but with our minds and ultimately with our hearts. So with that, again, I'll wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. We'll turn back to our Sidurim, our prayer books on page 586. Again, 586, Aleinu L'Shabbat. Aleinu L'Shabbat L'Adon HaKol, Latet Gedula L'Yotzer Breshit, Shelo Asanu Kegoye HaRatzot, Velo Samanu Kemishpechot Adama, Shelo Samach Elkenu Kahem, Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. We're on page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. This evening, we're thinking first of those who passed in our community in recent months. Martin Blake, Lynn Cowan, Faith Diskin, Arlene Eber, Jay Fagan, Ellen Frank, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Mark Joseph, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Buddy Kossoff, Helene Krotman, Emmanuel Kiprios, Leo Leibowitz, David Lieberman, Sandra Luongo, Norma Polsek, Lillian Schwartz, David Sent, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Sandy Slip, Larry Warter, Peter Weinstein, Rita Weitzman, Matthew Adam Zimmerman, and Yael Zerdar. We also mark the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Dr. Robert Auerbach, Sadie Bennett, Marion Bloom, Marshall Butler, Betty Cutler, Erwin Danny Daniels, Richard Agosi, Hannah Elias, Florence Feinstein, Fenimore Fisher, Mildred Garner, Tilly Gastworth, Gladys Goodstone, Irving Gostin, Milton Gross, Phyllis Katz, Dora Koffler, Evelyn Lauder, Rose Lefkowitz, Sylvia Lieberman, Anita Mello, Mary Neff, Louis Rossick, Katie Rugendorf, Morton Schoenbach, Edith Schussman, Victor Siegel, Ruth Laufer-Stein, Bertha Zuckerman, Harry Wartor, Irving Weller, and Claire York. In addition to the names that I just read aloud, if anyone has any additional names to share, you're welcome to add them to the chat or to say them out loud at home. I'll invite the mourners to join with me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Israel b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata ta'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and thank you again for being with us tonight on Zoom. We certainly miss being able to be together, but I stick by our decision. I think it was the right thing to do, and knowing everybody is safe at home. And thank you, Cantor Kevin, for joining us from the city. We appreciate that as well. So tomorrow morning, all indications are that it may still not be very pleasant outside, but that we should be able to, at least those that are able to get safely here. Anybody would like to join me here live in the chapel of the Old Whalers Church, if it is safe for you, use your best judgment. You're welcome to join us. Otherwise, we'll be on Zoom and live streamed as we always are, beginning at 9:30. And a reminder to join us for Torah study on Zoom at 12 o'clock after services. Also, a reminder that this Sunday at 10:30, both in person and on Zoom, at least that again is very much the hope, from the home of our beloved Ellen Frank, Zichronah Livracha, and Steve Dickman. We will get a chance, an opportunity to peek into Ellen's art studio, to learn a little bit more about her process from Steve, to see some of her works up close. Those that knew Ellen personally, this is a really wonderful opportunity. I've had the privilege myself, especially when she was alive, to give me a tour. But you know, she was a remarkable person and created some really, really powerful works of art, and some that many of us actually have never seen with our own eyes. So it's a really great opportunity if you'd like to join us at their home in the Springs. And if not, to join us on Zoom. I can't promise that it will be of the most ideal quality, but as best as your rabbi is capable of coming up with, I'll make it as much of an experience as you can from a distance. And we really thank Steve for being gracious enough to open his home to us and to have this chance to both remember Ellen and also to appreciate again her remarkable work. Just a few notes of things coming up this week. The Mitzvah will be meeting at 11:30 on Monday. My Heschel class will be back at 12 o'clock on Zoom, Hebrew School at 3:30, 5 o'clock Social Justice Committee meeting virtually, and also at 5 o'clock our Family B'nai Mitzvah program. Also on Wednesday, Hebrew School will be meeting at 3:30. This Thursday, a reminder again, we look forward to participating in our annual Interfaith Thanksgiving service happening here at the Old Whalers Church in the main sanctuary, and also streamed live on our website and YouTube and Facebook as well. No Zoom for that one, but streaming for sure. And again, that service will begin at 7 o'clock here at the Old Whalers Church on Thursday, and then there will be pie and desserts to follow for those who choose to join. And also a reminder that for those who are part of our younger cohort, our teens in our community, we're going to have a gathering with the members of the interfaith clergy, all those that are joining with me, and I'm forgetting, oh my God, how many people we have. I think 10 or 11 other clergies from different communities around the area, representing the three major religions of our area that we're familiar with, of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but also welcoming the leader of the Ocean Zendo community to join us as well. And really, it's a powerful experience, and one that I hope for those that feel comfortable coming in person, as many of you will be able to come as possible on Thursday, but certainly join us any way that you can. It's a great way of honoring what I think is a wonderful part of our congregation and our community here in Sag Harbor, in the way in which we interact with and communicate and learn with and ultimately change the world with our fellow sisters and brothers of other faiths. So reminder again, Thursday at 7 o'clock. My Siddur class will be back next Friday, 9:15. Also a reminder, on November 20th, the Women's Rosh Chodesh group will be having its regular monthly meeting as well. So I think those are all of those announcements. Kevin, you want to make an announcement for the city, or let me put you up on the screen? Go ahead.
Yep, I'll just add one more time that next Sunday is also, I believe it's November 20th, will be the Rossi concert that I'm involved in as well, celebrating 400 years of Salomon Rossi, the first known composer of Jewish choral music and the first written music that we have today. So we're doing a celebration of 400 years of his music. And if you're interested to know more, just feel free to reach out to myself or Rabbi Dan. We can get you more information.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Karen, do we have a closing song before Kiddush?
We do. On page 627, Shalom Aleichem. I was trying to think of how what I can do to connect to Rabbi's sermon, and I was thinking of peace, really, it's a lot of peace building. And I mean, what are Malachei Hasher, right? They're literally ministering angels, which, if you think about it, are really just, angels, or really just a group that's seeking to look after the needs of a particular group or a group of people. And so when I thought about this, I thought, enter in peace, bless me with peace, depart in peace. Those are all of the verses. And if you think about it, actually, Shalom Aleichem is normally translated as, peace be with you. But at the same time, it's really it's really on. So you could actually interpret it as, peace is really, it's on you, it's on us. Shalom Aleichem, it's on you. Shalom Aleinu, it's on us. So I'll give you just a verse so that we don't go on too long, but yeah. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
That's beautiful. That was great. It's Debbie, right? Yeah. I think if I recall, it's one of one of the last things that I think she composed, one of the later things that she had composed, I think. I remember actually the first time that my dad brought it home and we sang it at the Shabbat table, before she passed. So, or right around when she passed, I think, actually. Really very powerful. Kevin, thank you so much for that. We'll turn to page 123 for Kiddush. We don't have challah tonight. It wasn't delivered, so I'll rely on everyone to eat challah at home. But those, of course, who are on the Zoom, if you want to stick around for a couple of minutes afterwards, we can certainly do that. I'm going to probably jet home sooner than later so that I can actually get home, but we'll get a chance to wish each other a Shabbat Shalom. So again, we're on page 123. If you have a Kiddush cup handy, you're welcome to join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza b'hanu v'shabahat kodsho b'ahava u'vratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh Zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki banu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, ve'shabat kodshecha, ve'ahava u'ratzon hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and we'll say goodbye to our streaming friends, and then we'll give a chance for anybody